Hi everyone, this is Andrew Gibbons. Welcome to part 2 of the What is Good Posture video. In part 1, I took you through the steps of the lesson from the Awareness Through Movement book, and I left an important step out, and I wanted to put that at the start of this second part of the video. And the step is called Cease the Intention to Get Up, and in it Feldenkrais suggests that you come forward slowly, but then you simply suspend the action. You stop for a moment, and you use the pause to take a moment and sense any kind of effort you've made that compresses you, that shortens you in on yourself and pulls you towards the ground. This is where you've lost the good kind of support that allows you to lengthen up and through your spine as you make the movement. And doing this kind of practice where you simply suspend, you cease the intention to get up, and then you take the time to rediscover, to find the necessary support that allows you to get longer and then be able to carry the movement a little bit further forward without that compressive effort. This is a very, very useful strategy. And so I really wanted to include it here. There you can see this is something a lot of people do just as they come to lift the pelvis, their shoulders shoot up into their ears and they contract the flexor muscles in the chest and the abdomen. But here you can see that I've arrived now. I've cleansed the movement of all the compressive moments. And so now I'm starting to be able to take my spine forward without losing any length so that I really support myself clearly the whole way through. Now I'm starting to drop my arms down, much in the same way you see when someone goes down for a deadlift, when they go to pick up a weight bar off the ground. And so the top of the head can bow forward and the head and the pelvis lift and counterbalance each other all throughout the movement. And so this strategy of suspending the action, of literally stopping and figuring out where have you created an unnecessary effort, where have you sheared across the spine, and how can you recover the support? How can you teach yourself to find the necessary support that allows you to, again, bring the path of the action, bring it up and through the spine longitudinally. And this is what Feldenkrais calls in the second lesson of the book, developing the path of ideal action, where the support is really available to go up and through the spine at every moment. And this is part of the rigor of practicing with awareness through movement. Now, it can be useful to practice with certain props so that you really get a visual sense of what might be happening in your spine as you make the movement in different ways. Here you can see how leading with the lower back causes a certain kind of a bend to shear across the long axis of the spine. Now the spine can do this, but we want to be able to develop a sense of when we're shearing so that we can make a different choice if we want to. You can see here I'm contorting my spine in all kinds of ways that many of us do without knowing it, and I'm just using the foam roller to make the shape so I can really see how the compressive curves shear the force and the weight of the body across the axis. Now here I'm trying to make a slightly more ideal organization where I glide the bottom of the roller backwards, and you'll see that my sit bones are mirroring. They're doing exactly the same thing as the bottom of the roller. As I glide the roller back, the sit bones are gliding back inside the skin of my legs and my buttocks. And now you're going to see what happens when I overarch the lower back. Watch. Boom. I shear across the spine here. And you've got a lot of weight hanging off the spine, which is not ideal. You want to have this continuous length available if you know how to do it. And part of the lesson is to help teach yourself how to do it. Now with a different kind of prop, here I have a 12-pound weight bar. And if you look at the two ends of the bar, the two green tips, you watch how I'm using the bar to guide me, to help feel how to relate the top of my head with the bottom of my pelvis, my sit bones, so that those 2 points on the bar and of course myself, those 2 points are moving equal and opposite to each other all the time, so that I'm really learning how to create a more efficient counterbalance. So that's a very useful tool to use. Now, as you start doing awareness through movement more yourself, you'll become more and more interested by this idea of developing the path of ideal action, which Feldenkrais defines as really understanding how to direct the ground forces up and through your skeleton in an efficient way. And so it can be very useful to start to see how the shapes of the bones create the potentials for the action to travel along a more and more ideal path. For instance, if you'll notice the tops of the legs, they're bent inward at the top. The legs aren't straight. They're bent inward and they point a little bit up and underneath the sacrum there, where the spine connects to the pelvis. And this is an important thing to understand as you start to sense yourself internally in the movement, and especially when you use these kind of pauses to find out where you've lost the length or where you've made a compressing effort. Because now you can start to have an image of how your bones are moving. Because underneath the muscular effort, in order to be efficient, the muscles have to direct the bones efficiently. And for that to happen, you really need a clear internal image in order to move better and better. It's not just about making a better effort, but you have to have a clear internal image with which to guide yourself so that you can make sense of the sensations that you're feeling. And so here we are working a little bit with the skeleton to show how the legs have to draw up and underneath the pelvis in a very particular way to have this continuous support coming up and through the skeleton. Now, the intersection between the leg and the pelvis is there at the top, the ball of the head of the femur sitting up under the pelvis in the acetabulum. Now, if that long thigh bone is going to be an efficient lever, it's going to lift up and into the skeleton efficiently, it has to make a very specific movement. It has to drive the femoral head up and into the joint space and not try to slip out from under it. It's got to drive up and in as you're coming forward to stand. And how you line up your feet under your knees and under your thighs has a lot to do with how easy it is to make that movement in the hip joint. Here you can see I've got the lines of force representing the thigh bones, and depending if I have my heels in a similar parallel line as opposed to having my feet askew to the angle of the thighs, it makes a big difference. Here we can see the white rollers, which represent the lines of the feet, organized a little askew underneath the wooden sticks, which represent the trajectory of the thigh bones. We want them to be parallel and not askew, so that the ground forces have a clear path up through the ankle and up through the knee. And there are ways of learning how to find the support in the action, not just by lining up and statically understanding it, but actually dynamically. So here you can see me putting on a resistance band around the fronts of my feet. And the resistance band is going to pull the fronts of my feet together. It's trying to pull them closer together. So I have to generate a little bit of work and a little bit of support in the opposite direction. I have to find the center of my heel, and I have to press the forefeet outwards a little bit in order to maintain this orientation where the feet are really lined up parallel under the lines of the thigh bones. Remember that the thighs come up and in to the acetabulum, up and into the hip joint. And so there has to be this equal and opposite, a little bit down and out in the forefoot in order to drive the force up and in. Another strategy I use is to put a resistance band around the backs of my knees and to use the resistance of the band to help clarify and strengthen the function of the fibula. That's the long, thin bone running along the outside of the lower leg. You can see my daughter's fingers are on it there. And believe it or not, being able to turn that bone gently up underneath the knee a little bit has everything to do with the way that top of the femur starts to lift up and into the hip joint as you come forward. Now you can see me there. I fell forward a couple of times. I let the resistance band win. But what I want to do is actually use the support from my feet and my heels to turn the fibula back, to actually almost pull it backwards a little bit as I bring my weight forward and up. And that's all part of this ideal path of action where the body can simply unfold or fold itself over the knee without any loss of support, without collapsing, without essentially falling into yourself. Here I'm scooting back a little bit farther so that the band's pulling on me a little bit more. It creates kind of a louder signal. I still can work slowly. I can still sort of experiment with how I collapse, and I can see how that affects the whole of myself if just the fibula is pulled out of position. But now with a little more tension on the band, I can really calmly work my way through. I can pause when I want, and I can really find this little movement here. Here it is. It's just very small. And the important thing is the smoothness of the timing of the movement. You don't want it to be some sort of isolated action that's somehow separated from the whole. You really want it timed smoothly with that movement of bringing your sit bones back and your spine forward. The same way in the first video where we talked about timing the smooth contraction of the leg muscles, not over contracting and not doing it too early. It's the same thing here. And you can start to see how this is a really great way to use a little tool like this to get very specific in the way that you train yourself and the way that you practice. Now, for many years, I had great difficulty in going from sitting to standing and keeping my heels on the floor. And this little strategy is just something I started to use that really helped me. It provided a heel under my heel so that I can really have the support of the ground forces, even though my hamstrings were short or my legs were tight or my Achilles heel wouldn't lengthen as much as I wanted. But here I could put a prop underneath my heel, and now my heels really have a clarity of support that they didn't before. And this allows me to actually experience a more ideal way of doing it by changing my environment to make it easier for me to sense the pattern. Until I did things like this, I just struggled. You can stretch your heel all you want, but until you actually understand what it means to have the heels on the ground so that you can get support from the ground, the stretching doesn't make much of a difference at all. And so you can use a tool like this to really have a different experience of how you create the pattern of taking the sit bones back with the support of the legs, counterbalancing with your spine, and you can really take your time. This is something I noticed when I would wear dress shoes that had a little more of a heel. I had an easier time getting up and out of a chair. And when I wore flat shoes or if I was in my bare feet, it was always more of a struggle. And I finally started to put two and two together and just started to place something underneath my heel. And now if I'm sitting and reading and I want to practice a little bit, I can put something underneath my heels, and it's a really useful tool. And it allows me to actually do certain movements that I would have a lot more difficulty doing if I didn't have that extra support under there. And over time, you can become very inventive. There's ways of using a book. You can put a book underneath your heels and do your squats or your bends or your practice each day. And each day you simply turn another page and the support gets a little smaller. And the next day you turn another page and the support gets smaller. But the great thing is here I'm making myself kind of decrepit, and I still have quite a good counterbalance going, even though I have this bend in my spine. Even though I have my spine distorted, I can still, with this good support from my heels, I still am in control of the action. So this is one of my favorite things that I started working with over the years. Never fails. Now the last little strategy I want to show in this video involves, again, using this bar, or you can use a stick, or you can use a broom handle if you want. And we're going to place the stick in line with the spine. And again, we're going to use it as a guide. It's not meant to make your spine rigid or that you're supposed to be exactly as straight as the bar, but it's simply there as a guide so you can start to feel as you make the movements to come to stand, or in this case, I'm sort of practicing making movements over the table the way I would with clients, reaching to take hold of somebody's arm or to roll them or whatever I might do in my work. And here I'm trying to internalize this image of those two green points, the two ends of the stick, and really sensing that I have this continual equal and opposite available to me from my sit bones all the way to the top of the head. So this is a very valuable tool because it's just so damn consistent. Now for a lot of people, as they go to do things, as they go to get the telephone or they go to reach for the stapler, their spine bends and distorts, and that's okay that it does that unless you don't know that it does that. And so you can use the stick to just discover a different pattern. It's something you might not have noticed before. People that round, you can feel how the certain parts of the back press into the stick. It's really quite a useful and responsive piece of equipment, and it doesn't cost very much. So one of the things I love to use the stick for to show is this overarching in the lower back, this tendency people have to roll their pelvis forward and arch in the lower back to initiate the movement rather than understanding how to get the support to lengthen them. And so the stick provides, again, simply a guide, and here I am going forward, really trying to keep my lower back relatively close to the stick as I go, rather than what I was doing before, which was arching the lower back forward. And every time I do that, every time I arch in the lower back too much, I can feel it. I can feel I lose the contact or I increase the space. There it is. Until I get closer and closer and closer to some kind of understanding. Here I am with the space. I can place my hand into the space between the lower spine and the stick, and I can see how much space is there. And when I overarch, there, I can get my hand through. Too much space. I've fallen into my legs. I'm not counterbalanced properly. And then I can actually lengthen the spine, and I'll press into my hand just a little bit, just enough that it lengthens me. And again, now you have a tool to help figure out what you're doing, because it's all about being able to sense more and more clearly what's really necessary, what you do habitually, and whether you can make yourself comfortable and develop a new image of the action that you can use. So I hope you found this useful. I hope there were some strategies and some insights and even some challenges that you can put to use in your personal practice right away. If you've never done awareness through movement, I would suggest you go to my website, bodyofknowledge.me. There are many recorded audio ATMs there, awareness through movement lessons, that you can download and start doing tonight. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can get notice of further videos. And if you're watching on Facebook and you liked it, please hit the like button and share it with your friends and your community. I'd love to get feedback, comments, and if you want to have a conversation about the video, please get in touch. I'd be happy to talk to you. So that's all for now, and if you're in the Graduate IOPS Academy program that starts this October with Jeff Howler and Laura Yedwab and Anat Mary and myself, I look forward to seeing you there. See you on the next video.